back with chapter 12 today, and yesterday Ash had snuck off taking Tobu's weapons because when he had sung his song, it had pointed at a star in the sky, which he thinks that he needs to follow, and hopefully it will lead to his parents. So, chapter 12, all aboard. Many Fira had gathered at the dock in the early morning light to say farewell to the Pathfinders. There was always an air of sadness when a sleigh left. Once more, the Fira would be cut off from the rest of the world, forced to fend for themselves before the next sleigh came by with news and resources. And who knew when that would be? "May the fire spirits lend you haste," Alderman Kindle said to Captain Nook, bowing low. "We thank you for all you have done, Pathfinders, and we thank you for your fine hospitality. We wish we could stay longer, but we've got to keep moving. We've been delayed long enough and must head back to Aurora's embrace to resupply. Our cargo hold is looking terribly sorry for itself." "Surely you should ride for Skybridge then. That's the closest stronghold to us, I believe, as far as that may be." "Perhaps, if we were searching for scraps, dross and dregs. Not much in the way of good food in that Vulpes mine, though. Oh no, better we head straight back from whence we came." Captain Nook began to walk up the gangplank after her crew. "Keep fighting the good fight, Fira. Know that Aurora hasn't forgotten about you." "Wait!" came a desperate yell. The crowd recoiled and gasped as Ash pushed his way through them. Nook paused, her eyebrows raised. The nearest hunters closed in on Ash, ready to tackle him. "Ash?" the alderman said in surprise. "You're forbidden from entering our village. Not that rules are a thing you make a habit of obeying, it must be said." "I know I'm not. I want to talk to you, Captain," Ash said. The hunters looked to their leader, who gave them a small nod. With some reluctance, the hunters allowed the boy to step forward and speak. Ash spotted Rice, Shine and Flare. There was no friendliness in their eyes now, no sympathy in their expressions, just fear and contempt. He drew in a deep breath. "What is it, my new melodious friend?" Captain Nook asked with a smile. "This is it. No turning back. Take me with you." It sounded stupid now that he heard it out loud. Why in the snow sea would they want me aboard their sleigh? A child putting the whole crew in danger with his uncontrollable urge to sing the Leviathan song. To his surprise, Captain Nook actually seemed to think about it. "It could be that I'd have a use for a beastie tamer such as yourself on my sleigh," she answered. Ash reeled, but a number of the Pathfinders shared uneasy glances, and Ash could have sworn he heard one particularly dangerous-looking crewwoman grumbled disapprovingly under her breath. The dark, wild-haired man Ash had seen the morning the Frostheart had arrived pushed his way to the front of the Pathfinder crew. "If I may say, I think you are making an incredibly wise decision, Captain," he said, smiling down at Ash. "In these dangerous times where we find ourselves, I believe we should be looking to Songweavers for what they can offer us, rather than fearing what we do not understand." "Aye, well, there's no word of a lie that it's dangerous out there," Nook said to the man, before turning to Ash. "But what about your people, my boy? Your family? You're willing to leave them to take to the paths?" "I have no family here. Not any more," Ash said. The gathered Fira shifted uncomfortably, but no one tried to deny it. "We have tried to look after you, Ash," Alderman Kindle muttered. Ash ignored this. "My parents, my real family, are out there. They're still alive. I'm sure of it. I have to find them." Ash's voice became more desperate. "Setting off with you Pathfinders is the only chance I have." Captain Nook eyed the crowd curiously. No one said anything. No one stepped forward to argue. "Any objections, then, if I take the young lad with me? Anyone going to be crying tears of woe and loss later?" she asked. The crowd kept their eyes to the ground. Someone at the back coughed. Ash half expected to hear Tobu's low voice call out, but he was nowhere to be seen. Ash couldn't help but feel a little sad, even if Tobu's appearance would have ruined all his plans. Alderman Kindle yielded and bowed his head. "You must walk your own path, Ash." Then, to Ash's surprise, he strolled up to him and whispered hurriedly in his ear, "I'm sorry it has come to this, my boy. I know you don't believe me, but we have tried to keep you out of harm's way. Listen, before he left, your father gave me a message for you, saying I would know when the time was right to deliver it. I had no idea what he was talking about. He was not himself then, and a lot of things he did and said seemed strange to us at the end." Ash stood in shock. People never talked about his parents, despite his best efforts at asking. His father had left him a message? Why couldn't the alderman have given it to him before? But before he could think about this too much, the alderman continued. "I now believe this is the time your father meant. This is goodbye for us after all. The message was thus: a drifting star to light the dark, to an ancient beacon cold and stark. Guard it true, protect it well, lest shadow break through prisoned shell. I hope it means something to you, Ash, for the meaning certainly escapes me. Ash's confusion turned to elation. He was pretty sure he did know what this was. It was the next verse of the lullaby, the next clue on the path he had to take. That's why his father had delayed the message, so it didn't get confused with the first verse, not before Ash had solved it. He knew that once Ash had, he would leave the Fearer, and the Alderman would give him the next clue. If ever he had proof that his parents were guiding him, this was it. Ash grinned, suddenly feeling as though everything was falling into place. Thank you, Alderman. I think it does, Ash said. Kindle smiled, though it was full of sadness. Spirits guide you, Ash. So, it is settled then, announced Captain Nook. Now, if you all be so kind as to make the way for the young lad, I'd be much obliged, she said, motioning with her large hands. That's my new song-weaver you're all crowding. Welcome aboard the Frostheart, young Ash. Only minutes later, Ash stood on the Frostheart's deck, unable to close his mouth in awe at the sheer size of the thing. The wooden masts of the sleigh, rising above like the tallest of pines, groaning in the chill wind, their sails furled. A large bolt thrower was fixed to each side of the sleigh, a small comfort against what awaited them. The vessel's giant archaeomech propellers, each blade longer than 2 men standing on top of each other, were whining in eager anticipation, their archaeomech build knowledge seeming more like magic to Ash than human-kin invention. What those ancients had created was truly a marvel. The sunstone engine hummed, warming up and supplying the lifeblood the sleigh required to move, like the glowing heart of some mighty leviathan. Sunstones were said to be fragments of Mother Sun herself, and were used across the snow sea for a variety of reasons, though mostly for power. The Fearer considered them to be sacred objects, and the tiny shards they managed to find were too small to use for anything other than decoration anyway. But it was said the Vulpes mined sunstones the size of boulders, and the one powering the Frostheart was impressive indeed. It was as big as Ash's dinner bowl. Oh, just wait for something to go off the screen. Up close, the sleigh looked a tad worse for wear. Chip paint, scraps of random metals and materials creating a patchwork of surfaces and textures across the sleigh's hull, dampening the image of the glorious sleighs told in tales. But to Ash it could have not looked any more glorious if it had tried. The sight of a single thumb-sized painted star nestled amid the snowflakes on the sleigh's mast sparked the memory of the fantastical sight he'd seen in the sky the previous night. A glowing star. This is my path. A crow cawed at him from atop a mast. Ash looked at it with curiosity, its black shiny eyes staring back. It was unusual to find crows around here, who were seen as bad luck. He touched the broken pieces of his ocarina within his furs, warding off any bad omens the crow might have brought. Are you ready, young song-weaver? Captain Nook asked, stepping to his side and looked upon her vessel with pride. Luna was waving to them both from the rigging. It's not an easy life out there. You may find yourself longing for the comfort of a stronghold after all. Ash looked at the village. It had been his home. He had been born there, but he was no longer welcome there, whether he wanted to be or not. He was sure wasn't sure if he ever had been. He took a deep breath. There's nothing for me behind stronghold walls, but there could be everything for me out there. Captain Nook put her massive hand over Ash's small shoulders. I could tell you didn't belong with the Fearer, but be under no illusions that the wilds are merciful. But those brave enough to become pathfinders are few and far between, and goodness knows I could do with an extra hand. You've made a courageous choice here, Ash. You've grabbed your destiny by the horns and are showing it who's boss. That's certainly the attitude we take to kindly here, dear boy. We'll make a pathfinder of you yet. Despite his nerves, the thought of the incredible things he might discover made his belly do a somersault, his butterflies stirring up a storm. Ash couldn't help but smile. The Fearer watchman upon the watchtowers either side of the dock, signalling there with no signs of leviathans close by. The Frostheart engine stirred the propellers into roaring life, the large sunstone in the centre of the sleigh glowing bright. The vessel began to slowly roll out of the rising stronghold gates and down the ramp, picking up speed as it did so. The sleigh creaked and groaned, but seemed sturdy enough, judging from the looks of relief on the faces of the crew. This is it! I'm really leaving! He wondered what Toby was doing, whether he discovered he'd left yet, but there was no time to dwell on it. The sails were unfurled. With a loud ka-whump, the Frostheart hit the snow. White powder spraying over the sleigh like a wave, soaking Ash, who laughed at the cold shock of it. All around him was a thrum of activity. Each member of the crew was well practised at their duties, pulling on the rigging, adjusting levers and turning dials on the engine. Captain Nook was at the helm, bellowing her orders and steering the tiller tiny master pod at her side. With a final roar of its engines, the Frostheart lurched forward and dashed off and out into the wilds of the snow sea. Ash hung over the side rails, wind whipping through his hair. They were moving at an incredible rate. Ash felt as though he were flying and closed his eyes at the rush of it all. The speed was intoxicating. He watched the fear of Stronghold get smaller and smaller as they left it behind, and soon it was just a smudge on the white horizon. He allowed himself a small pang of sadness as he watched it disappear. It might have held some unhappy memories, but there had been good ones too, especially when he'd been younger, and it had been the only place Ash had ever known, the only place he'd ever called home. Everything and everyone in his life was there, well, except for my parents. And now he was on his way to find them. Ash's skin prickled with delight, and not a small amount of fear. There was even maybe the slightest, tiniest bit of guilt at leaving Tobu too, but that was behind him now, and who knew what lay just beyond the horizon? Mum, Dad, at last, I'm on my way. I will find you. Ash's world had suddenly become a lot bigger and a lot more dangerous. Okay, and now we've come to the part where it says part 2. So next time we'll be looking at part 2 of the story.